Meanwhile, the Philippine president is already in the U.S. for 3 days to deepen economic and security ties. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is the first Southeast Asian leader to visit the White House in the second term of President Donald Trump. Mr. Marcos says while he expects to focus on security and defense, newly raised U.S. tariffs, that's from 17% in April to 20% threatened earlier this month, also a priority. And Manila would face the full force of that 20% levy on all exports to the U.S. if it is not able to cut a deal. The Philippine leader has vowed to push for a trade deal and secure long-term access to the American market. He's due to meet the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth today. And more Nick Harper joins us live from Washington, D.C. Nick, of course, President Marcos from the Philippines looking most immediately to lowering tariffs, but he's also there for security concerns as he meets the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State. So the U.S., in return for perhaps cutting tariffs, might seek some concessions from Philippines in other areas.
That's right, Wesley. This is certainly being seen as a high-profile visit. The fact that Marcos Jr. will get to meet the President, the Defense Secretary, and also the Secretary of State very much shows that the US values that relationship, and the fact that he is the first Southeast Asian leader to visit during Donald Trump's second term really underscores the commitment that the US sees in the Indo-Pacific and sees in that relationship with the Philippines. Marcos, before he headed here, gave a quick interview in which he said, "I expect our discussions to focus on security and defence, but also trade." And I think security and defence will be integral for what the United States wants to try and achieve in the Indo-Pacific. Of course, maritime security in the South China Sea is of concern for both countries. We have seen the Marcos Jr. administration very much moving closer to Washington, trying to align itself much more closely with the United States. We've seen that pivot and the concerns from Manila about China's growing dominance in the South China Sea. For the United States, of course, they, in return, have seen the opening up of Philippines' military bases to the United States in recent months and years. And that's something that Donald Trump might be looking to try and get more of. Having Marcos Jr. here at the White House very much communicates to Beijing that value in the relationship, but also shows that the US has a partner in that region that's very much in lockstep with Washington, trying to push back against China's growing dominance.
So in principle, you have the Philippine leader in the White House. He could make a unilateral decision, for example, to increase the number of military bases allowed to the U.S. in the Philippines. Or if he makes any agreements, any concessions, do we think, if one assumes that the August 1st deadline is a hard deadline, we can expect any deal on specifically trade and tariffs before that deadline on the 1st of August?
Yeah, there is that assumption that it's a hard deadline, but it could, of course, move again just 10 days until we get to August the 1st. Really that rush to try and do deals. We've seen in the Asia-Pacific region so far only Vietnam and Indonesia achieving deals. The Philippines is hopefully hoping for one. And as you mentioned, concessions may play a part to getting a preferential rate to try and lower that 20% baseline tariff that would be placed on all goods entering the United States. We've already heard from Marcos Jr. saying that he wants changes to that rate, saying he wants to alleviate the effects of a very severe tariff schedule on the Philippines. There is that $5 billion trade deficit that the United States is trying to level out. And really, that's the big sticking point at this stage, trying to achieve a deal that both sides feel is fair. And trying to get there is, of course, very difficult. There's been plenty of negotiations in the background, but getting the two leaders to meet here in Washington really presents that opportunity of getting a deal done. But I think concessions will very much play a part, trying to reach a mutually acceptable, mutually beneficial deal. That's the phrase that Philippine officials have been using so far in their hope to try and lower that potential 20% tariff rate.
So, Nicholas, the value of a face-to-face, especially between men who can actually call the shots, like Mr. Trump and Mr. Marcos as well. saw some optimism of a deal between the US and China, given that Mr. Trump might meet the Chinese president on his way to the APEC meeting in South Korea, either there on the sidelines or stopping off in China before he gets to South Korea. Can we confirm any possibility of a meeting between these two leaders later this year?
Well, not at this stage. The White House has not yet confirmed that. But of course, it is something that Donald Trump has spoken about plenty of times, that desire to have the face-to-face meeting, something that he sees great value in, being able to sit down with the leaders, see them face-to-face, look them in the eye, and sometimes strong-arm them. That is something that we have, of course, seen in many business and trade dealings from the US president. But there seems to be that renewed optimism, exclusive reporting from the South China Morning Post, being picked up around the world. That potential of a sideline meeting, either in South Korea at the end of October, beginning of November, during the APEC summit, or the potential of a three-way summit in Beijing sometime around then, not just with Xi Jinping, but also some discussion that it could include Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin has been asked about that. They said that they had not heard if Trump is going yet. But there seems now to be some movement, at least, to getting them all together.
Oh, thanks. Nick Harper there, reporting live from Washington, D.C.